Hello and welcome everybody to our November newsletter. So this month it's all about community. And we thought that was fitting, as coming up to Christmas is a time that we start thinking more about family, friends and our community in general. We start to attend different functions. Our local councils put up Christmas decorations. There are more church fetes and street parties, which I've been to a few just recently myself in the last couple of weeks. And it's a time where we are reminded that we are really all part of that wider community. Recently, I also travelled to Adelaide and happened to come across a building called U City. I don't know if any of you have heard of it or seen it, but U City is an innovation by Uniting Community, and it brings together residential, social, commercial and community services right in the heart of the city. The project in itself is very inclusive. U City contains retirement, NDIS apartments, as well as fully accessible short-term holiday accommodation. They have commercial tenants, which comprise of Finlayson's Lawyers, Respect Dental, Acadian Health and Goodwill. There are also a number of community spaces and a function centre. There's also a wonderful Italian restaurant with a grand piano and bar called Luigi's, which I have to say was a hive of activity whilst I was there. Unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to enjoy the dining, but maybe next time. And also just around the corner is the fabulous Pitt Street Cafe. So what struck me about this building was how diverse the community was and that it was a great place to be. It was full of life and vibrancy. So why can't we achieve that in residential aged care and retirement communities? All too often we try to look at ways to bring the community within, but without a great deal of success. And aged care is certainly a challenge. How do we make a facility more vibrant and attract family and friends to want to spend more time when visiting a loved one? How do we create an environment where staff would enjoy going to work and love to be part of a vibrant community? How do we create a place where you feel you are still part of the community rather than being ostracised? How do you bring together community, togetherness and connection? So it's definitely a challenge. Now, obviously the location of U City was right bang in the middle of the city, so that in itself adds vibrancy with people constantly coming and going. Now, if your facility is located a bit out of the way, think about ways to involve the community. What is currently lacking in your neighbourhood that could be incorporated into your facility and thereby encourage community engagement? Now, obviously, if you're designing a new building, it is easier as you have a blank canvas. Although I have to say that even with new facilities, very little thought is given as to how to bring community within. Cafes are the most common consideration, but often they are not that successful and tend to be used by residents and families only. Now, of course, that is perfectly fine, but not if the goal is to bring community in. So the reason it may not work could be due to a number of factors. For instance, where is it located? Is it located externally, or do you have to come into the residential aged care facility to access it? Is there a need for a cafe in your locale? Would it be something used by the neighbours, or would it really only be used by visitors and staff? Can you lease it to an external operator, or is it run by your organisation? Now, the other thing, child daycare centres are now starting to be considered, and research definitely indicates that they have positive outcomes, especially for dementia residents. There are, of course, many other ideas and options that could be considered, and it will depend on your location. So what are some of the other things to consider? Well, do you have the space for a village green? Can you create that cafe on the village green with a children's playground? Can you create a space for family get-togethers? Could you open the space up to organisations to use for fetes or craft and food markets, even a community garden? Do you have a function centre or room used by residents and families that could also be used by external community groups that could also then include residents? Now, function centres and multi-purpose rooms are quite often confused with activity rooms. So let's chat a little about the difference between them and how the spaces are used or could be used. Firstly, what is the main difference between a function centre and a multi-purpose room and an activity room? Okay, so firstly, a function multi-purpose room is generally a large room or space to accommodate bigger groups within an aged care facility. It's normally located at the front of the building where both the community and residents can easily access it. An activity room, on the other hand, is normally a smaller space within each of the houses of an aged care facility, and it's designated for resident activities. So some questions that come to mind are, how are activity rooms currently used, and is there actually a need for individual activity rooms within each house? Also, is it normal to have an activity room in your own home? Okay, well firstly, we don't normally have a designated activity room in our own home, but many facilities are not designed in the small household model. So we'll put that issue aside for the time being. Secondly, we find that many activity rooms are too small, the furnishings are not flexible, and therefore the room is not utilised all the time. This may not be an issue if a facility has lots of additional spaces for residents to use, but generally we find that many aged care facilities are lacking when it comes to sitting rooms or additional resident spaces outside of the main lounge dining room. Therefore, having a designated activity room that is set up with mainly trestle tables and chairs is a waste of valuable space. Can we rethink how the spaces are utilised, and can activities be more localised? Let's look firstly at what we mean when we talk about activities and how do they fit into our lives. Activities or hobbies fall mainly into two categories. Firstly, there's the everyday type activity or hobby. These are the types of things we do either independently or with our family or friends within the home. It may be very simple things such as watching TV, cooking, gardening, doing the laundry, sewing, knitting, or it might be doing an activity with someone else such as playing cards or games or playing ball with the grandkids. So generally, we don't need a designated activity room in the house. We do these things naturally in either the lounge room, our dining room, certainly in the kitchen, or somewhere outdoors. We just need to make sure that it turns back to the lounge room, dining room, or sitting room after the activity has finished. Now, obviously, living in aged care means that we need to take other people into consideration. And so if someone doesn't want to be involved in the activity, are there enough spaces for people to be on their own and have the ability to be moved to perhaps a space where they could do an individual activity such as listen to music, draw, or watch TV? The other types of activities are the ones we tend to do out in the community. So they may be things such as exercise classes, art classes, book clubs, men's shed, or even a cooking club. Now, it's not to say these couldn't be done within the home. However, it gives the opportunity for residents to be part of the wider community. So these are typically done in much larger spaces such as a function multi-purpose room. So when designing a new facility or redesigning your existing, consideration needs to be given on what spaces are actually required for activities. Consider small groups versus large groups, and is there an opportunity for residents to engage with the wider community? The reality is that the needs for people entering residential aged care are becoming increasingly complex with higher levels of acuity than ever before. Taking residents to activity rooms becomes increasingly difficult for staff, both from a time perspective and also because of acute complex needs and lack of mobility. So what about the retirement sector? Well, there is no doubt community is extremely important to them. This market is changing. It's becoming increasingly competitive and consumer expectations are high. Numerous sources tells us that there are 5 key consumer expectations. Prime location is the first. They want to stay connected with the larger community. They want pet-friendly spaces. They want choice of bistros and cafes, and they want boutique fitness options. The second is communal spaces. They want flexible spaces. They don't necessarily want spaces designated to one thing. They want continuing education classes. They want to mix and mingle with multiple generations, and they want more social interaction. Technology is the third consideration. They want the ability for telemedicine. They are into prevention and monitoring health. They like voice-activated devices, turn on the lights, etc. And they are into smart speakers, smart sensory, and Apple TVs. The fourth is access to healthcare. Unlike years ago, they actually want continuing care communities. So retirement and aged care together is no longer such a faux pas. They want on-site healthcare, and they want access to doctors, podiatrists, dentists, and audiologists. And finally, lifestyle options. They want social opportunities. They want less financial complexity. They want to be active in the community, and they want personal expression and growth. And they like the idea of bars with self-serve systems. That one I found quite interesting. Pay as you go, not a bad idea. So I guess in summary, it's not unusual that we all still want to be part of a community. So let's consider how we can make aged care facilities and retirement homes more like the U City project or your own unique community. We definitely know staying connected and being part of a community is pretty much important to everyone. And there is no doubt there are challenges in being able to achieve this, especially with all the financial burdens that aged care providers face today. But I truly believe careful planning, consideration, and better design will allow us to achieve this. Okay. So that's it pretty much for the month of November. We're now starting to wind down for Christmas with only 4 and a bit weeks until Christmas Day. Although here at DeFitis we are as busy as ever, but we do intend to have a bit of a break over Christmas to freshen up for the new year. We will have one more newsletter before we head off for our Christmas break. So I look forward to chatting to you again one last time this year. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.